Okay guys, so today I will be doing a tech overview of Vanquish Soul, the best deck in the OCG by far. If you have not been keeping up with OCG and you're mostly just a TCG player, all of the latest Road to the King metagame breakdowns have shown that Vanquish Soul has a substantial lead over every single other deck, and their meta seems to be shaping up where Vanquish Soul is like 30 to 40% representation, then Yummy follows after that, and everything else is just clearly a tier below. So if you are new to Vanquish Soul, I recommend watching my intro to Vanquish Soul first. I'll put the link in the description below. This video is mostly going to focus on all of the different tech options that I have seen people playing in the OCG. So these are tried and tested and usually place in some decent capacity in OCG tournaments. Okay, to get started, I'm not going to do too much of an overview of what Vanquish Soul's game plan is because that is covered in my intro video, which is in the description. But I will just tell you, the reason that most of these tech choices are extra deck cards, I'll start with a basic overview of a normal Vanquish Soul deck list and then talk about the tech stuff. But the reason that most of these tech choices are in the extra deck is because there isn't actually a huge amount of room to flex in the main deck. So let me just briefly go over that and then I'll start talking about the tech stuff. So if you look at the basic Vanquish Soul cards, we have the OG starter in Razin, so you have to play it at 3. We have the new starter in Madlove because she can now search the Vanquish Soul start, which is an extremely high quality extender. But the reason you don't play more of it is because it's not only searchable by the Madlove, but also it's a spell card, which means it does not have a monster attribute. And because Holy Suit is such a powerful card that will sometimes give you pretty decent turn 0 plays, you want to build your deck in such a way that not only is your hand normally playable because you have a good distribution of attributes like the earth, dark, and fires, but you also want to have more high roll hands so that you have more likely turn 0 plays. So you don't want your deck building to kind of defeat you from the beginning and have to make you work harder to search all the things that complete your hand to play. You just want to be able to play based on the cards that you've drawn in your hand. Like, I mean, it sounds obvious, but this is the reason why there is so little flex and so little non-engine space in Vanquish Soul. In terms of the actual engine stuff, there is, I think probably most people are playing the third Jiaolong, and it seems like it's not clear whether people have agreed on the double or the triple burger. So just keep that in mind. I think that triple Jiaolong is probably a little bit more typical than double Jiaolong, and I probably also would play triple in the end. But then that comes with the downside of not having a lot of non-engine space. The Stake Your Soul is a super high quality starter because you're always going to have attributes in your hand. So this card is basically never dead. So this is basically a starter, even though technically it's not a 1-card starter. Reinforcement of the Army gives you a Razin, and if you already have access to it, it still gives you another fire. So that's totally fine. The Case of Canine is optional. This gives you another option to search for the spell searcher of the canine stuff instead of just the Canine X-Force Liberation, which is a ceiling card that is also, I guess, technically optional, but it's a very strong ceiling card, so most lists seem to be playing it. And then there is the canine stuff, and I think at this point it seems quite clear that the larger package is simply superior to the smaller package where people were just on the triple Izuna and the 1 Lupus to do the out-of-turn play. I think you actually should be on the triple Jokul and also a Lantern. So some other choices that are super common before I get to the more niche tech stuff, that although they are all good, everything that I'm talking about is actually played in lists that win. So Vados is a card that says during the main phase, if this card is in your hand, quick effect, you can target 1 card in a field zone, special summon this card to your opponent's field, and if you do, destroy that card. Then you can add to your hand or set 1 Ashen continuous trap for your deck. Obviously, you won't be doing that. And then if this card is sent from your opponent's field to your graveyard, you can destroy all monsters on the field. And these effects are both once per turn. So because field spells are pretty typical these days, this is a card which meets the attribute requirements of the deck. So you're not going to like brick on it in terms of attributes. And also it will basically fizzle their field spell because you can just, chain this on activation or whenever they're using the effect of the field spell. And then if you have a way to trigger this properly and get it sent to the graveyard and destroy all monsters on the field, then, as long as you have a way to play around that and make a push afterwards, this can be a pretty strong interaction. Doesn't seem like anyone really plays more than one of these, and I haven't played enough of the Justice Hunters meta to really know how good it is to beat another player's field spell, especially on turn 0. But I guess like technically this does give you like a turn 0 hand trap type play. The D-Shifter is a card that this deck could happily play at 3, although there are some interactions that use the graveyard, like the Lupus stuff and the Lantern stuff, but still, you would happily play this at 3 just because it beats so many other decks almost immediately, but it's at 1 in both the OCG and the TCG now, so I think you probably just do play this at 1 in almost every single list. Aside from that, the Snow Devil is an extremely strong ceiling card that maybe you don't have to play, but it's such an extraordinary part of the Vanquish Soul game plan that it probably counts as mandatory. Same as X-Force Liberation, although this is not as strong as Snow Devil. So I guess if you were only going to play one of these, it probably would be the Snow Devil. So now you can see that you barely have any space for non-engine. We have kind of like 10-ish cards here, give or take maybe 2, maybe you could go up to 12, and you would really, really be pushing it if you're trying to go higher than 12, unless you were not playing the larger K9 engine, but that just seems incorrect to me. And then you also have to take into consideration that very strong cards or strong metacall cards like Droll, or cards that are generally strong like Fulos, do not match the attribute requirements of Vanquish Soul. So when you play more cards like these, you are increasing the chance of low rolling yourself. And even though it's pretty unlikely that you're going to draw more than one poor attribute card, still, it's less likely, for example, that you'll be able to actually snatch seal your opponent by having both an earth and a dark if one of your attributes is, like a wind, and then maybe you happen to draw a spell, so then you only have like 2 other cards in addition to Holy Sue that both have to be the correct attributes. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now that basic stuff out of the way, let's go on to some of the tech choices here. First of all, in the main deck, there are very few tech cards, but one of them that is not in every single list is Phantasme. So obviously this is a dark monster. And this card, so if your opponent special summons a Link Monsters, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand, draw cards equal to the number of Link Monsters your opponent controls, +1, then shuffle cards from your hand into the deck equal to the number of Link Monsters they control. And then when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a monsters you control, quick effect, you can discard 1 card, negate activation. If you do, destroy it. And then these are all once per turn. So the thing that is cool about this card, aside from being a dark, is that Vanquish Soul cares about card economy. Vanquish Soul is trying to use attributes to buff your hand and continue modifying your own hand size and attribute distribution so that you can resolve all the effects you want to resolve. Like, for example, the Snow Devil, so you have one of each dark, earth, fire, or the Caesar, so you also have earth, dark, fire, or whatever attributes that you need, like the earth and fire to burn for 1500, whatever. You're always trying to modify your hand for that type of stuff. And this card is unlike Ash, for example, where yes, Ash is useful in terms of, you could stake your soul an Ash and then bring out a fire and then you have access to a starter. But if you are on your turn 0, so your opponent has won the dice roll and they're going first and you Ash, you now lose this attribute. Whereas the Phantasme, this remains an attribute in your hand even if you're going first, and then if you use it, it's going to replace itself in terms of card economy. So this is like a pretty good fit into the Vanquish Soul kind of game plan and attribute gimmick, and so I like this card. But because it obviously only works when your opponent has Link Monsters, this to me feels more like a side deck card, like a main deck card, and I don't know if I would actually want to main this. I feel like I would probably rather just main a card that's really poor in terms of the attribute gimmick, like a Fulos or a Droll, depending on what's actually good in the meta, and just accept the fact that I'm gonna brick on the attribute and have it as a better non-engine piece. There are other cards like Meowls, which do meet the attribute, the correct attribute, but are just not really on the first line of Charmies that you would be playing. But I guess that is something that you could consider in the main deck if you are really worried about this type of stuff. But, obviously Meowls has the same issue of Phantasme in that it's kind of matchup specific. It's not generic like Fulos and kind of Droll are. Okay, so let's go on to extra deck stuff now. So I'm not going to talk about Rocks, Rock of the Vanquisher, Little Knight, Ripper. I don't think I'll talk about Hound or Ex-Werewolf either, because these are all cards that are basically in every single deck list. And then almost everyone is playing Zeus, almost everyone is playing Starslayer. So it's really the last 5-ish or maybe 6 slots that are up for debate, and then potentially some cards that are in your side deck. So first of all, more meta-relevant thing here is Contact C. So when your opponent normal or special summons a monsters, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand to your opponent's field in defense position. This card's controller, which will now be your opponent, cannot fusion, synchro, XYZ, or link summon unless they use this card as material. This is not like a totally undefeatable floodgate. I believe that it's most typically used against Yummy to stop them going into a link 1. And if I remember correctly, you can't just... oh wait, do I not have it up on field? So there's another rank 5 card here, an XYZ, that is a Book of Moon. It's a new card that does not exist in the TCG yet. This card, oh, so this one. So this says it's 2 level 5 monsters, so it's generic. And obviously this can be a turn 0 type monster because you can make it with the Azuna stuff. Like if you're able to do this on turn 0. So this card says, during the main phase, quick effect, you can attach one material from this card, then target one face-up monster your opponent controls, change it to face-down defense position. And then if it's sent to the graveyard, you can target a face-down card on the field, destroy it. So this works pretty well if your opponent is going to summon one monster to go into the Yummy Link 1. I don't know if this is the reason that it's played, because again, I'm not familiar enough with the Justice Hunters meta. But you also have a Floodgate. So you don't just use one effect and then you can't use it again for the rest of the turn. So this card potentially will beat your opponent on its own, and it also is an earth, so it matches your attribute requirements. Spell card Soul Exchange. This is not super popular, but I have seen this in a couple lists. So this says, immediately after this effect resolves, tribute summon one monster, and you can tribute monsters your opponent controls even though you do not control them, but it cannot be tributed this turn. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, your opponent can apply this card's preceding effect. So your opponent will typically not be able to get much use off of this. I guess it really depends on the deck your opponent is playing, so it probably would be more of a side deck card than a main deck card. And this is interesting because you often will have cards like Heavy Burger, for example, or the Jiaolong or whatever that you can tribute summon, and so it is kind of like kaijuing your opponent, but then putting your own engine card on your field. I don't know if this card is really worth it. It feels like it requires a little too much because you have to both have drawn this and also the other thing. And then if you're using this immediately, you're not using the other thing as an attribute reveal. But I just wanted to mention it because I have seen it in a couple lists. Some of the other stuff that is, I think, more common is everything that comes out of Nash. So Nash Knight, I think, is probably mandatory, but not every route that this flexes into is mandatory, and not everyone plays exactly the same stuff. So this card is 2 level 5 monsters and a water. So this is, you're not going to be locked out of this with the non-light lock from the canine stuff. So this says, cannot be destroyed by battle while a number of monsters on the field. During the main phase quick effect, you can attach 2 materials from this card, attach one number XYZ monster from your extra deck to this card as material that has a number between 101 and 107 in its name. Then you can attach one other face-up monster on the field to the card, this card as material. So the attaching a face-up monster on the field to this card as material without targeting is an extremely strong form of removal. It's in some cases even stronger than something like a Subversion, which pushes back, because you actually are in control of the material. So unless they remove this, they can't even get it back into their graveyard, even if that would even be useful to them. So this card, I think you probably have to play in every single build, and then there are options for what you can do after this. So some things you can do out of turn would be, so let me reset this real quick. So this card, the requirements for this is you attach a number XYZ monster between 101 and 107. It doesn't actually have to be like the same or higher rank or whatever. So this is between 101 and 107. This is Giant Hand. And this says, when a monster effect is activated on your opponent's field, quick effect, you can attach 2 materials from this card, then target one effect monster your opponent controls. While this monster is face up on the field, that monster's effects are negated. Also, it cannot change its battle position. So if you were trying to max out on interactions in your opponent's turn, this is one of the options where the Nash Knight can detach both materials, then you attach something from your opponent's field, and then you overlay the Giant Hand. So the Giant Hand will now have 2 materials to detach to do another negation. So you can play this. I haven't actually seen this in a huge number of lists because people are often going for other options, but this is one thing that you can also go for. But another super common play with Nash Knight, and I guess this is maybe more typical if it's your turn and you're playing into a board and you get to make this, but you can make Silent Honor Arc because this is between 101 and 107. It's inclusive. So this says you can attach 2 materials from this card. Now this is not a quick effect, so if you make this in your opponent's turn, so you're like attaching your opponent's monster to this off the Nash Knight and making the 101, if they pop the 101 before it rolls around to your turn, you're not going to be able to do this. But you can attach 2 materials from this card, target one special summon monster your opponent controls in face-up attack position, attach it to this card as material. You can only use this effect once per turn. And then if it would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can attach material instead. So this is like another type of removal because you're attaching it as material, which is, like a decent type of removal. This is pretty good for board clear, for going for OTKs, stuff like that. But Nash Knight also has a CXYZ pairing, CXYZ Nash Knight. Now this card, you can just overlay on top of Nash Knight. You don't have to do anything else, and it keeps all the materials. This allows some cheeses. So this says you can attach one material from this card, special summon from your extra deck, basically the same thing, a number XYZ monster that has a number between 101 and 107 using this face-up card as material, but destroy it during your opponent's next end phase. And this is also treated as an XYZ summon, and you're transferring all the materials. So one of the things that you can do with this is you could make this guy. So this one, obviously you're not doing the 3 level 9 monsters. You can attach one material from this card until the end of the turn, negate the effects of all face-up cards currently on the field. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects on the field. So that's kind of, this is kind of like that DDD guy that was like kind of like a mini VFD. So this is a pretty strong card that also can help with OTKs and stuff like that, or just allowing you to establish a board without your opponent being able to do anything, or they have to choose to respond to this card, you know, coming onto the field, and then you can push with the rest of your stuff. But probably the most unfair of all of the cheeses is this one is the number C104 Umbral Horror Masquerade. So when this card is special summoned, you can target a spell or trap card on the field, destroy that target. That's not really what's important here. If this card has number 104 Masquerade as XYZ material, it gains this effect. So this card is, if it has this as material, this is not a super useful card. It just has a battle phase effect where you can detach a material, and it's whatever. But this card, if you have the 104 as material, and because we can manipulate with the Nash Knight and the CXYZ Nash Knight, the materials that we have under the card, because we can do that, we can be able to use the bonus effect here, which is once per turn during either player's turn, when a monster effect is activated on your opponent's side of the field, you can detach one XYZ material from this card, negate the activation, then you can send one random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, and if you do, have your opponent's life points. So why is having your opponent's life points important? Because if you have your opponent's life points, so let's say they were at full 8,000, they go down to 4,000. If you resolve, where is it? Heavy Burger to burn for 1,500. So they'll have 4,000, you burn for 15. So they go down to 25 now. So if your opponent is now at 25, because they've gone down to, they've been burned by both the half down to 4,000, now the 1,500. So they're at 25. And you also use the Snow Devil. This is burning for 4, 6, 8, 1,800. Your opponent is basically, like, there's almost nothing they can do when you have your rotation set up for the Heavy Burger. Even if you don't resolve all these things, if you just continue Heavy Burger burning them every single turn, they only have a couple turns left to live. So it's not like technically an OTK, but it's setting them up for just losing as the turns pass, unless they somehow have a way to stop you from resolving your Heavy Burgers. Okay, what other cards here? So there are, this card I've seen in some lists as well. So this one is Silent Honor Dark, just like we have Silent Honor Arc. So this one says, this is one of the other ones that you would cheese out because this is 3 level. I guess you technically could hard make it, but you would never want to hard make anything. You always want to use 2 level 5s to go into something. Once per turn, you can target a special summon monster your opponent controls, attach it to this card as material. When this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard while it has material, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, then gain life points equal to the original attack of this card. But you have to have the original Silent Honor Arc in your graveyard to activate and resolve that last effect. So this is really just to have another way to take one of your opponent's monsters and attach it as material, which is an option. Then we have Kurikara Div Incarnate. So this card is a fire, which means it meets the attribute like Fire, Earth, Dark requirements of the deck's gimmick. This card I've seen a lot of lists play at 1 in the main deck. I'm not exactly sure why it's that popular, but I guess if you aren't sure what non-engine to run and you want to play a bunch of one-ofs like Shifter, Vados, Kurikara, it's very hard for your opponent to play around one-ofs, especially if you have like a whole bunch of them in your deck. And I guess this card is like situationally very strong in some metas, so you could consider playing this card. Durandal, okay, I'm not actually sure if this is the reason people are playing it. This is just what I thought of. So this card also requires 2 level 5s, and it says, once per turn quick effect, you can activate one of these effects, so you have to choose one of these. Either when a monster effect is activated on the field or a normal spell or trap card is activated, you can attach one material from this card. The activated effect becomes destroy one spell or trap card your opponent controls. I feel like this is probably not going to be as good because you probably would prefer to keep your Vanquish Souls start on field. Although I guess maybe that could come up sometimes. But the second effect says you can attach one material from this card. Each player with a hand shuffles their entire hand into the deck, then draws the same number of cards they shuffled into the deck. So I feel like there could be some shenanigans with this withdrawal, like especially if your opponent doesn't see it coming. Like if they don't know that you have draw or something, you could use this, and then your opponent, it kind of would be like the trickster reincarnation thing, where someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it works this way, where they would end up shuffling their hand back and not being able to draw. So then there's Saryuja Skuldred. I've only seen this in a couple lists. So this card gains effects based on the number of materials used for its link summon. If you were to use 4 different materials to link summon this card, you can draw 4 cards, then place 3 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck in any order. One of the cool things about the K9 cards is these put a huge number of bodies on field, and you don't have to use them to XYZ summon because you are not locked into XYZ summoning from the extra deck. So if you were playing, I think what's most likely is a list where you were post side deck and you had a bunch of super strong blowout cards, maybe like Anti-Spell Fragrance, or I don't know, it could be D-Barrier in a certain meta, whatever it was. You would be looking to dig for those blowout cards, and then you would basically be setting your the blowout card that you drew off the Skuldred, and then you would win off of that card. So I feel like you could consider that. Then we have one of the cooler techs here is using DDD Marksman King Tell. So this requires 2 level 5 monsters. I don't think there's realistically a way for you to resolve this card's effect, but this says during either player's turn, if you took any effect damage this turn, not your opponent, because then that would be much easier to resolve if you took effect damage, you can detach an XYZ material from this card, target 1 face-up monster on the field, it loses 1,000 attack and defense, and if it does, inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. I don't think this is really going to happen, but this requires 2 level 5s. And if you summon this card, then you can overlay this card. So this can be XYZ summoned using a DDD monster you control, and this is a DDD monster. Not just a DD, but he's a DDD. He's a triple D. And so if you have a triple D, you can get this guy. So this guy says, once per chain, guys. When a monster card your opponent controls activates its effect, quick effect, you can either detach 2 materials from this card or destroy 1 Dark Contract card you control. You won't be doing that. You'll be detaching 2. And if you do, attach that opponent's card to this card as material. So the cool thing about this is if you make your Marksman King Tell, that means that this card has 2 materials, and then there's this card. So when you overlay the King Deus Machinex on top of it, the King Deus will have 3 materials. The 2 under the Marksman King Tell and the King Tell itself. So when you detach 2 materials to attach your opponent's card to this card as material, you will now again have 2 materials. So this, you can use this twice in a single turn because you will gain back a material when you lose 2. So this is pretty useful, and it's also a very interesting type of removal, again, like the Silent Honor Archon, whatever, because you're attaching it to your guy. So they're just totally losing the card. So this is a pretty cool interaction here. Okay, then I've seen that almost everyone is on this card. I don't know what this is for. It has to be a meta call for Justice Hunters. If you know what it is, let me know in the comments. Codebreaker Virus Swordsman. This is kind of less of a tech card and more of just a Baguska out. So this requires 2 effect monsters, but has 2,300 attack. And if you look at Baguska, this guy only has 2,000 defense. So this card, any 2 monsters going into this will out the Baguska. So that's a pretty useful card to have if you think that people are going to be on Baguska, which I guess that's also kind of a meta call. Then the last things that I wanted to show here, I think, are the Rescue Ace stuff, and also briefly talk about Kaijus. So I feel like this is probably not good, but I have seen it in some lists. So this is a fire, so this does meet the gimmick requirement, and it's probably one of the more sought after attributes in fire. So this says, when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, quick effect, you contribute this card from your hand or face-up field, special summon 1 Machine Rescue Ace monster from your deck. I don't think there is a better one to summon than Fire Attacker unless you're actually playing Rescue Ace. But this one says, so where is it? If a card is added to your opponent's hand except by drawing it, you can draw 2 cards, then discard 1 card. So the point of this is that it's very easy to resolve an impulse, right? Like any deck is going to allow you to resolve an impulse, and any deck is going to trigger, almost any deck is going to trigger your fire attacker. So as long as you have drawn the impulse, it's almost a guarantee that you will also resolve the fire attacker. But I feel like adding another brick into the deck, because this is a brick, the fire attacker, is probably not worth it. I feel like I would rather just draw a card that's better to immediately use in my hand. And so then this brings me to the last thing, which is the kaijus. So because kaijus do have correct attributes, so we have fire, we have earth, and we have dark, it means that you can play kaijus if you want. And I guess that could be also partially a meta call, or if you really feel like you don't want to play anything that's a bad attribute and you only want perfect attributes, but you're not convinced by other tech options like the fire attacker, or you don't want to main the Contaxi or whatever, you could consider the kaijus, and I have seen some people do that. The cool thing about the kaijus having all three attributes is however you have built your deck, let's say that there's a particular attribute that you were missing, let's say that it's fire, you can choose to play Dogorans over the others. If for some reason you were lacking on earth or dark, which is pretty unlikely, I think, with the larger K9 package, but if you were, maybe you're playing the smaller one, so you didn't have as many darks, you mostly had the earths or whatever, you could just add in the Radians, because this one is the dark one. So yeah. So that's basically it for this tech overview. If there are other cards that I missed, let me know. This is a deck that I will be covering more in the future, and I probably will do some more in-depth videos on how to actually play the deck closer into the future. So thanks for watching. Also, feel free to join the Discord if you want. And if you want to @ me, do not DM me, because I don't usually check those messages, but you can just say something in one of the general chats in the Discord and just @ me and I will respond. So thanks for watching.